Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. It's 11 o'clock, and I think we'll get Paul started on his course on political tribalism and the identity of politics in America. So will everybody kindly silence your cell phones, turn them off or quiet them so they don't ring? And then I'll give it over to Paul.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
In my lifetime, I've lived through 15 presidential administrations in America. And this is the first time I have heard the terms tribalism and identity politics characterizing our political world today here in this country. So this is a new kind of concept in American politics, and as you may know, it's been used by both the left and the right. The right, of course, accusing the left of being predominantly made for identity politics, and that's the reason that it lost the election in 2024. Who's the identity about? Well, marginalized groups that were conceived of as being oppressed and needing, let's go back for a second to the initials DEI. As you may know, DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that is something that the Trump administration is trying to erase from all organizations and documents. But DEI essentially has been the predominant characteristic of the Democratic Party for some time now. Only now we use the term identity politics. And it involves women, Black people, Latinos, girl athletes, disabled people, immigrants, and anyone who is considered to be somehow either excluded from the American benefits or from sort of citizenship or from whatever the Democratic Party deemed as needed but still lacking. And the term's been picked up now by the Democrats as well. Those doing an autopsy on the election, saying, you know, we would have won if it wasn't for DEI. So it's been a big moment, but it deserves to be understood that from the time of the Mayflower and Plymouth Rock, and perhaps even before, identity politics has always been present in America. And just off the top of my head, I made a list of all of the kinds of identities that were dealt with in a political way from the beginning of the New World. And this is an old legacy and a continuing legacy. Back in colonial times, the appropriation of land from Native Americans, the Indians who were here long before anyone else. In Massachusetts, the Puritans Calvinists who came from Britain and from the Netherlands excluded anyone who was not a Calvinist, and that lasted for quite some period. The importation of Africans for slavery. Colonies and states, once colonies became states, restricting women from political office and voting. New Jersey actually allowed women to vote when it was still a colony. And then when it became a state in 1789, it then took away that right. Rebels versus that's the people who called themselves patriots during the American Revolution versus loyalists, whom they called Tories during the American Revolution. Into the 1800s, the persecution of Catholics. There were riots in Philadelphia in the 1820s and 30s. If you see the basilicas of St. Peter and Paul downtown, you'll notice there are no windows that are within stone throwing height, because they would have had broken windows in the basilica due to the enmity that was directed at Catholics. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which excluded not just Chinese, but people from other countries in the Eastern world, Eastern Asia, including the Philippines Islands and Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, and such. Restrictions on Jews. The designation of slave and non-slave states, when the territories that we gained, the Louisiana Territory, the land taken from Mexico as a result of the Mexican-American War, and particularly from a political standpoint, directly, the Nationalization Act of 1890 that restricted people from other countries in coming to America. In the 1900s, the Gentleman's Agreement, negotiated by Theodore Roosevelt in 1907, that excluded Japanese from the mainland of the United States. They were allowed to go to Hawaii because they were working on sugar plantations, but they couldn't come into the mainland. The 1924, probably one of the most punishing immigration acts we've ever had in this country, that established quotas, but based on the census of 1890, no more people were allowed, especially people from Southern Europe, Italians, Poles, Hungarians, people who were deemed not worthy of coming to America. And of course, as we know, the restriction on Jewish immigration during the Holocaust. Jim Crow laws, restrictions on women. When I went to Columbia University in 1959, I had a class of 24 people, 22 of whom were men. There were 2 women in the class, but one didn't count as a woman because she was a nun. And you know, nuns weren't women. They had their own characteristics that were considered to be worthy of getting an education, but there were only 2 in the class. the criminalization of sex, the prohibition of intermarriage. All of these right up until our lifetimes. The Mexican Bracero program during the World War II, and that has been celebrated in a song by Woody Guthrie called Deportee, when a group of Mexicans was being deported back to Mexico because they were here on a work contract that ended and they couldn't stay. So they were on a plane and the plane crashed. And Woody Guthrie wrote this song called Deportee because he said, the radio just said they were deportees, but they have names. Anyway, as you see, identity politics is a very long-standing kind of political activity, but today it's really still continuing and in the forefront of decisions that are made on the basis of political expediency. So I'm going to ask you a question now. As you look at me, what do you see my identity as? Or if we're going to make it multiple plural identities, what do you see? What am I? I'm a white man. Right. Okay, what else am I? What? Senior?
Older.
I am old. I am old, Father William. Yes, I am old. I am an old white male. What else am I?
Straight.
Straight. Yes, I am a heterosexual. What else am I? I'm a teacher. All right? I'm also Jewish. And I'm a Democrat. Is there anything else?
Musician.
Pardon?
You're a musician.
I'm a musician. That's right.
You dress nice.
But I'm not a fashionista. Okay, so now, which of those identities lends itself to politics? And there are two ways of looking at identity politics. One, outward, from me and whatever group or groups I belong to. If I belong to men, what do men say about and do about politics? If I am Jewish, what do Jewish people do and say about politics? And so goes it. What do teachers do and say? And just go down the line, say from the inside out, how do we treat the political world? Do you understand the question? All right. What is it that we want that we use politics to get? That's the question, basically. How do we engage whatever identities we have that engage in politics? How do we do it? Well, we do it. We join groups, we lobby, we write letters, we demonstrate, we vote. Okay, all of those political means to gain whatever equality, whatever benefits, whatever recognition we believe is deserved. You follow? So that's the inside out part. That's what we, as whatever the identity is, we gain. When the famous Loving Act, if you recall, the Supreme Court finally freed black and white people to get married in what was called the Loving Act. There was a movie made about that. Well, it was brought to the judiciary. And so that was a political victory. You follow? Now, that's the inside out. What about the outside in? How does the world regard Jews? How does America regard Democrats? In other words, you have an identity that is not at your control. It is controlled by outside forces, outside characterizations of whatever you are. If you watch Fox News, eventually you'll find out that Democrats are destroying America, or that Jews are controlling all the banks in America, and or that there's a great replacement theory. Are you acquainted with that one? Where people who are white believe that that the Democrats, particularly Jewish people, are now bringing in immigrants and elevating minorities to replace white people. If you've never heard that, just check it out. Pardon?
To what end? To replace white people.
Power, control, greed. That is, you can look it up in Wikipedia. It's called the Great Replacement Theory. And it really is an article of belief on the part of many white people, people who might be called white supremacists. Okay, so we see that there is that identity politics takes two different forms. The form of the group that wants politics to help them, and the group that does not want politics against them, used against them. So we'll talk more about this as we go along. For the moment, let's take a look at what I've put in the form of handouts. You have a quote here. What makes identity politics a significant departure from earlier movements is its demand for recognition on the basis of the very grounds on which recognition has previously been denied. It is as women, as blacks, as lesbians that groups demand recognition. This demand is not for inclusion within the fold of universal humankind, nor is it for respect in spite of one's differences. Rather, what is demanded is respect for oneself as different. All right, here are the topics that we're going to be talking about today. I'll be addressing the question of what is political tribalism and identity politics. I've already started addressing the issue of identity politics, but you see in the next 5 classes what the agendas will be. Next time we'll be talking about political dynamics and who and what is an American and issues around citizenship. I've also included a bibliography so you can see what books I've consulted and where a lot of these ideas can be developed. Individualism. The framers of America who wrote the Constitution did not write for groups. they wrote for individuals. That there's nothing in the Constitution really that pertaining to groups. Everything you read there is framed in the individual sense. So, for example, here's the 14th Amendment that's been talked about relative to the arresting and detention and deportation of immigrants who are undocumented. All persons born or naturalized in the United States. Now notice it's persons. It's not people belonging to a group. And that's the way the Constitution is written. What also is very interesting, if you weren't particularly aware of it, in the Constitution, that means all persons. That means anyone who is not an American living here, including immigrants. The Constitution makes a very distinct difference between citizens and persons. Persons being anybody, and citizens being Americans. And right there in the 14th Amendment, you'll see it. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person, okay? So it made a distinction between citizens and persons. So don't think that because citizens are not mentioned, that these people do not have the right to the laws applying to them. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of laws. But today we do not operate as individuals. We operate as members of a group. So are all groups tribal? Well, what do you think? Well, I guess we have to define what tribal means. A tribal group is, first of all, a group of, that's an affinity, it's related, a group of doctors, a group of, professionally, it's easy to see those kinds of groups. Politically also, neo-Nazis, a group of residents of Cathedral Village. Are we a tribe? Do we have, what do you think? Are we a tribe? You don't think we're a tribe? Okay. Well, let's talk about what defines a tribe. A tribe is defined of a group of people who share values, who share goals, who share ideals, and who are loyal to one another and to the mission of the tribe, or whatever that tribe is, and who will fight to protect it. Given those definitions, do you think we're a tribe? Yes, I think so. I think we are a tribe, and that's just another tribe. Democrats, Blue Dog Democrats, represent a sub-tribe of the Democratic tribe, because Blue Dog Democrats are those Democrats who are conservative. In other words, they're Democrats, but they don't approve of abortion, and they do support guns. They're not anti-gun. So they are called blue dog Democrats. The reason they're called blue dog Democrats is because they've been shunned to the point of by other Democrats, so that they're out in the cold and they turn blue. I'm serious. That really is the background of that term. Okay, so in terms of the tribe, there are various things we need to say about tribes. But I also wanted to bring to your attention what we see in the media these days. I brought a bunch of clippings and printouts that I took from the media over the past few weeks, and just talk about identity politics and tribal politics. Transgender, the whole transgender I'm not going to call it a problem. The whole transgender issue these days, the FDA warns the South Street sex shop over breast binders. All right, this comes from the Inquirer. Why Trump's Office of Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is focusing on white men. Why? Here's something from the Washington Post just the other day. Why women on LinkedIn are masquerading as men to gain the benefits. One woman's gender swap experiment quadrupled her reach on the career platform. So from the standpoint of career, these women thought they would be better if they could pass as men. Maha moms, now Maha, mothers against, or mothers, what is it called there? Maha, mothers, Mothers for America, what is it again?
Make America healthy.
Mothers to make America healthy again, that's it. Maha moms are angry at the EPA. Transgender veterans sue over loss of benefits. Delco, the Delaware County, approves anti-bias policy for LGBTQ residents. You see so much in the news about identity politics. In Mamdani's New York, Muslims become a political and demographic force. Some Republican lawmakers call for mass expulsion of American Muslims. A celebrity-backed letter shows anti-Semitism entering the mainstream. A new book that makes spousal rape a crime. This is a lot of our political leaders still believe that a married man has the right to have sex with his wife whether she wants it or not, and that's considered rape, but not by them. J.D. Vance says America is a Christian nation. All right, so we see that you that there's much here in the way of identity politics. Let's move to talk about tribalism. What I put in your handout. This is individualism in the group. Each group tries to maintain harmony within it, but in relation to other groups or government, it can be competitive and belligerent. Now, we're going to talk throughout this course about tribalism, and later it will be talking about toxic tribalism. See, tribalism is very beneficial because being part of something larger than yourself gives you a lot of benefits, a lot of meaning, a lot of satisfaction, and things can be accomplished since there's a group, and the group can be specialized in terms of skills, and it can be experienced, which individuals can benefit from. And if you're a newcomer in a group, you can learn techniques and histories and things that are very important. But also you can be competitive with other groups, even to the point of warfare, especially if they're moving in on whatever territory you've got. So identity, so here are the themes of identity and identity politics. There, and I mentioned this already, there are two important dimensions of group identity. The first is the extent to which an individual feels they're part of a group. That's self-identity. The second dimension is the extent to which society views them as belonging to a particular group, and that's called social categorization. People look at you and say, you're a Democrat. You can't come to our Thanksgiving dinner. So that's looking from the outside in. All right, key themes: individual identity, how people view themselves and their relationship to the political process. Group identity, and those are, of course, tribes. Those are, all groups are not tribes, just those groups that have a very definite kind of cement that holds them together, and they think alike. That's something called groupthink. You're probably familiar with that term. Tribalism implies the possession of a strong cultural or ethnic identity that separates the member of a group from the members of another group based on the mutual survival of both the individual members and the tribe itself. Members of a tribe tend to possess strong feelings of identity. What's interesting here is that America has been called a supergroup because it is the only one among the major powers of the world that has forged a national identity that transcends tribal politics. If you travel to other countries, you see that you are an American. You may not have thought about it beforehand, but when you go elsewhere and you see how their culture is, you realize that you have another culture, and it's an American culture. And it's hard-won, it's precious, and right now, as it says here, this tribalism that is seizing American politics puts the American identity in danger. there's a term called intersectionality. During the civil rights movement back in the 1950s and 60s, Black people were working very hard to gain equality and were helped by a lot of Americans who were not Black. But out of that came some resentment on the part of Black women who believed that Black men were gaining, but Black women were not. And you may recall hearing that or reading about it at the time. When Black women started to agitate and to go public in trying to gain benefits that they thought were needed but overlooked, Black lesbians stepped up and said, but they're not representing us. So you see what's going on there. All right, so this is what's known as intersectionality. This is where you have multiple identities. So if you are a Christian, you can be an evangelical Christian. That makes you different from a Presbyterian or a Episcopalian Christian. The churches are quite different. The goals are different. The practices are different. I just want that term to be understood because there's a lot of discussion within identity politics about intersectionality, that you have to satisfy the various dimensions of someone's identity or a group's identity. They're not just all doctors. I'll tell you a little anecdote about Dr. Tribalism. In New York, I had a friend who was the administrator of a hospital. And one day he told me this story. He said, my office as president is on the second floor of the hospital. And some physicians used the back stairs so they wouldn't be seen to come to my office and report a surgeon whom they believed should no longer be practicing. So they wanted to bring this to my attention, but they did not want other doctors to see them. Whatever the reason was, alcoholism, old age, or whatever it was, the doctor was no longer fit to operate on people. So the administrator took this very seriously, and at a meeting of the medical staff, asked for a vote among the physicians themselves, who was a fairly self-governing body. And all of the physicians, I mean all of them, including the people who reported the surgeon, voted to keep the surgeon. Now there you have tribalism, you see, that you don't fracture the tribe. The tribe stays together, at least in public. That's not an unusual happening. Okay, let's talk more about tribalism. You know the story of the preacher who was very absent-minded, and he was reading his sermon, and he came to the end of a page, and then so Eve said to Adam, there must be another leaf here somewhere. All right, I've got some. We have all kinds of stuff on tribalism. But let's talk more about identity, because we'll get to tribalism. Where does a sense of identity come from? Well, as already discussed, there are many kinds of identity. Personal identity, and I'm reading from a Wikipedia document. There's an individual identity where you look in the mirror and you try to fathom who you are and what you believe in, and how you relate to people. But there's a cultural identity. Formation of ideas an individual has based on the culture they belong to. Individuals may pick and choose aspects of cultural identity. Professional identity is, as I've indicated, identification with a profession. An ethnic identity is something you may not be able to control. If you're Irish and it's 1850, you cannot help the fact that everybody hates you who isn't Irish in America, because you may be aware of the fact that no Irish need apply. That was a sign placed in windows of stores and businesses during the Great Irish relocation to America. So there's a presumed, but from your own standpoint, if you want to identify with an ethnic group, then others that recognize your group as a contributing factor. National identity, that's what I was talking about earlier. Members of a nation share a common identity and a common origin, the sense of ancestry, history. A religious identity. Gender identity describes, and this is now up for grabs, then this is part of DEI. Gender problems, gender issues. Transgenderism, LGBTQ. It can be used to refer to the gender that other people attribute to the individual on the basis of what they know from gender role, social behavior, clothing, hairstyle, etc., and a collective identity, which is tribalism. Belonging to a group, an individual who identifies with the group will dedicate their lives to the group over individual identity. Consider it's like a gang, really. It's a very small group, but they are very tight, and they will. But in the larger sense, we know that in war, soldiers will volunteer to be killed, to fall on grenades, to draw fire from an enemy so that the rest of their company can survive. There's a wonderful song about that called Roger Young, about a company of Americans during World War II on the Solomon Islands, where Roger Young draws machine gun fire from a Japanese hidden machine gun nest so that the rest of his company will live. He volunteers to die. Well, that is not unusual in a very tribal collective. And if it is strong, and it says here, if there's a sense of belonging that is strong, an individual who identifies with the group will dedicate their lives to the group over themselves. They will defend the views of the group, take risks for the group, often with little or no incentive or coercion. Collective identity often forms through a shared sense of interest, affiliation, or adversity. So right now, there are probably a number of Jews who are closer together because they all feel the pressure of anti-Semitism, and which is rising in America and elsewhere, and they want to share it with others, to belong, to be part of something bigger, something that is more able to defend. Okay. Here are some partial definitions of tribalism. Common interest of mutual survival, preservation of a common culture, birds of a feather flock together. Okay, when groups feel threatened, they retreat into tribalism. They close ranks and become more insular, more defensive, more punitive, more us versus them. In America today, every group feels this way to some extent. Whites and blacks, Latinos and Asians, men and women, Christians, Jews and Muslims, straight people and gay people, liberals and conservatives, all feel their groups are being attacked, bullied, persecuted, discriminated against. And I've given you a list of common types of tribal behavior by occupation. Now, I've already given you a little anecdote about physicians, but it's true. In police shows on TV, you often see police departments trying to cover up skullduggery on the part of individual police officers or detectives, and they try to cover up whatever they've done. Well, that's not unusual. Okay. Common characteristics of social tribes, jargon or slang in particular groups. I don't think we have any here, do we, in this tribe? Herd mentality, individuals imitating other group members of higher status or self-confidence. Group think, thinking alike for conformity, lack of knowledge, acceptance, minimizing conflict, and ethnocentrism, belief in group superiority. Exclusiveness, an us versus them attitude toward outsiders, loyalty to the group and its members. Okay, let me open the floor up for any comments or questions you might have.
I don't see how using the term tribalism is an improvement of what we have done in the past. Interest groups, or if you look at these various examples that you give, some are groups that are much more cohesive than others, so that, what you call a tribe is not exactly the same for various groups. So how does tribalism help us understand what's going on?
Okay. Tribalism, as I've indicated, is more there's more devotion and more tight fit within it of people. In other words, if there are special interest groups, often have people who disagree with policies, let's say, of the leadership. Tribes usually have stricter leadership. They're hierarchical, like gangs are. They're hierarchical, or in the case of us, we have a leader in the office over there. There is more affinity or more commonality, however you want to put it, among the members than there are just in special interest groups. And also, they tend to be less temporary, more permanent. Special interest groups can convene or converge over individual projects or whatever it is. But a tribe tends to be around a lot longer. There are differences. I hope that answers your question, Larry. Yes?
Now, what would you call John Fetterman, who is in a group of Democrats, but is now saying he has supported the actions in Venezuela?
What would you call them?
Ridiculous.
We don't have a name for folks like that. Some people regard him highly by that his embracing of certain Republican people and ideas, because they don't like the fact that we are such enemies now. We're no longer adversities, we're enemies. There's real hate dividing these groups. And people like Fetterman actually are peacemakers, in a sense, aren't they? Well, if you disagree, fine. But he certainly has been getting more attention from Republicans favorably than almost every other Democrat. And that's supposed to happen in the Senate. It's supposed to be bipartisan. You're supposed to work together. And he's trying very hard to reach across the aisle. So there are many people who commend him rather than abhor what he's doing. Yes?
You've helped me clarify something. I am uncomfortable with a lot of social movements today. I was a 60s kid, and when I started out in social movements, what I was striving for is to have people treated as and judged as individuals, not members of a group. And so Black people should not have certain constraints put on them because they are Black. They should be judged openly, with openness. However, now there is a sense that you must accept all things Black in order to be considered a friend. And that's not the direction that my judgments take me necessarily. So I hope you're not telling me that all of this categorizing that is going on is something I have to accept or like, or yes, understand, but I don't want to live there. I don't like it.
Whatever I'm saying is not advocacy. I'm just trying to enlighten folks. So if you think it's helpful to understand these things better, that's all I'm aiming for. We live in a world right now that's turbulent, and and there are various aspects of it that people aren't aware of. You've heard of political tribalism. You've heard of identity politics. You may not know that much about them, so I'm hoping to give you more knowledge. By the way, I have something for you. It's a Susan. It's something I printed out, and it's it's about the great replacement. Here it is. I want to hand that back.
So, question. I was thinking of the need perhaps for a different,
Whoops, I'm sorry.
a different, less intense word than a tribe. When I think of tribe, like an Indian tribe, one's life and existence are just tied up in that. Or say a platoon in a foxhole. That's very tribal. People willing to sacrifice their lives because their lives depend upon each other. So when it comes to affinities that people have, maybe we need a different word that is less intense than the word tribe.
Well, you can call it anything you like. I understand, but the reason I'm bringing this to your attention is because this is now commonly applied. The use of the word tribe is more common. If you look at the bibliography that I've given you, you'll see that a lot of books have tribe or tribalism in their titles. And so that's what we're stuck with. It's this characterization of what these close-knit groups are like. And back in 1960s, they were just called special interest groups. And maybe some of us still remember that and prefer that. But we don't have a choice now. Everybody else is using the term. Anybody
I
else?
think we have time for a
yes.
couple more.
Thank you. I lived in Iran
Hold it a little closer to you.
lived in Iran for 3 years, and I found that the tribes that people came from, the Bakhtiari tribe and the Qashqai, they were much more loyal than to the Shah. And as we know, the Shah didn't last long.
Yeah.
But I found that loyalty to a tribe was much greater than loyalty to the country.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes, that's not unusual. That's what I've been saying, that a tribe, one of the characteristics of a tribe is the internal loyalty. And you've seen that if you look at programs of the mafia or other tribes. I mean, even a group of leaders, a program like the West Wing, for example. Do you remember that one? Yeah. This was the team of folks around the president who were in charge of various government functions, and they were a tight team and very loyal, and they represented probably what we didn't call back then a tribe, but they represented a tribe. And the tribes in this country are more loyal to themselves very often than they are to the national leadership. Any other comments or questions?
Yes, it seems that a lot of the reactions in the room are to the fact that people are looking at the purpose of these tribes in our society today. They seem to be very divisive and come from hate and self-greed. And it seems that there's a larger question out there. It's like, how does a society orient itself? Could there be a more communal approach that would bring people together with all these identity? Yeah, with all of these identity politics, it seems like it's not going to happen. So the question is this endemic to who humans are, or can we get above it somehow?
Yeah, this is a good question.
Mhm.
Can you get above tribalism? Do we have any experience? Is there any history showing that we did rise above it? You know what? It's really. I don't have the time right now to talk about this, but eventually in this course, I would like to discuss paradigms. And paradigm change is what America seems to be going through right now. And when it does, when paradigms no longer serve the purpose of defining what and who and all the things it's supposed to do, then there's an era of conflict and confusion, and you have to wait for the older generation to die out. So the story of Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt into Canaan, that took 40 years. Why? Anybody ever ask why? And why is because the old generation that loved Egypt had to die. And this is really the story of paradigm change. And we are in a paradigm right now that is really unhealthful.
We'll have one more question and then we'll conclude.
I think what Terry talked about yesterday is how to bring communities together and how they all read one book and talked about it. And the paradigm did seem to change. They came from anger and hate and they worked together on a problem. And, you know, a lot of things he said yesterday are the beginnings of change that I think give us a little hope that if it's done right, we can increase community.
Yes, you can change on a smaller scale. When you can bring people together in a school district, you may not be able to do it in a state the same way, but people are trying, and as the story of the Israelites' exodus tells us, that often it's a matter of the old people having to be replaced by the young people. And what we're seeing in New York City right now is giving people some hope, because the Mr. Momdani is coming with new ideas. Well, they're not really totally new, but they're different, and perhaps more fruitful in the way of bringing people together. So that's something we have to wait and see about. Anyway, thank you, folks, for
Thank
being
you,
here,
Paul, very
and
much.
hopefully I'll see you next time.